So hello everybody, on behalf of the Stanford Women's Community Center, I'm delighted to welcome you to our annual Gender Equity and Justice Summit. My name is Jenna Jung. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a junior at Stanford, and I'm from New York City. I'm the coordinator for the summit, and it is my pleasure to kick off our Activism panel featuring 4 phenomenal activists. We want to thank the Centers for Equity, Community, and Leadership for their generous support of the summit, and our co-sponsors, the Queer Students Resources Center and Feminist Gender Sexuality Studies. To give an overview for the format of today's conversation, we will have some prepared questions to start, and then we will open up the conversation for the last 15 to 20 minutes for questions from the audience. Before we begin, please join in our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect and humility that most of us are viewing this talk from occupied lands all over the world. Traditionally, at the WCC, we begin our events with a land acknowledgement, recognizing that at Stanford, we do our teaching, learning, living, and activism upon the stolen lands of the Muwekma Ohlone people. This land has been and continues to be of great significance and importance to the Muwekma Ohlone people. We invite you to recognize the land that you are on and the people who lived there before you. The WCC recognizes that colonization is actively ongoing through land grabs, generational trauma, and other forms of violence. We also recognize the work of Indigenous activists in fighting back against colonial governments to regain sovereignty of their native territories. Today's land acknowledgement recognizes that our histories live with us in the disparities of today and drive the activism that we take with us as we shape our future. Now, I would like to turn it over to my amazing intern, Amelia, with whom the summit would not be taking place, who will be moderating our panel today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jenna, for that introduction. I'm Amelia. I'm currently a first-year student at Stanford, and right now I am zooming in from my home in Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania. I'm so excited to be moderating this panel today and introduce you to the amazing panelists that we have here with us. So without further ado, I'll tell you the name and a little bit about each of the panelists. First off, we have Elba Morales from the Centro Legal de la Raza. We have Juniper Yun from the San Francisco Transgender District. We have Isabella Zizi from Idle No More San Francisco Bay. And finally, we have Jenny Wun from AAPI Women Lead. Thank you all for being here. We are so excited to have you. And to kick things off, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a bit about what your organization does and what your role is.
Okay, thanks. I'll go first. So like Amelia said, my name is Elba Morales. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm the Director of Development and Communications at Centro Legal de la Raza. Centro Legal has been around for 50 years. We were born out of the Chicanx movement of the late 60s. In Berkeley. We were co-founded by a bunch of law students in Berkeley that saw that there were no culturally appropriate or language accessible, low or free or low cost legal services for impacted community members in Fruitville, which is actually the neighborhood I grew up in. I grew up right around the corner from our office, and so what Centro does, we do legal services around immigration, tenants' rights, workers' rights, and we also do affirmative litigation. And so my job, I'm trying to go quickly. I know there's so many of us, so sorry. I'll try to keep it quick. But what I provide strategic oversight for fundraising and for our communications work. I really see my job as I'm not sure if I consider myself an activist, but I really feel like I lift up the work of our frontline staff, our attorneys, our paralegals, our legal assistants who really work with detained community members in the prisons, in ICE detention centers, and help them organize with one another. And so all I do, I feel, is like lift up the work, communicate about the work, and show folks, the importance of this work and really the realities of what is going on to some of the most impacted members of our community.
Thank you, Elba. I will go next. I am Juniper Yun. I use she or they pronouns, and I am calling in from San Francisco's Transgender District, the world's first legally recognized district dedicated to those with the trans and gender nonconforming experience. I am a program associate at this organization. I also am a working artist and cultural practitioner who is a trans woman of color. Our organization particularly activates 7 different work areas where we affect tenant protections, economic workforce development, arts and culture, cultural competency, cultural heritage conservation, land use, and trans empowerment. with this work, it has a historic story behind it, with the fact that it was founded a few years back by 3 Black transgender women or transgender identified folks. And previously, it is the site of the Compton's cafeteria riots, one of the United States' first uprisings of trans and gender nonconforming people against police brutality in 1966 that actually predates Stonewall in New York City. So our work spans from a housing program to public awareness campaigns to affecting change in many different areas, both locally as well as even internationally. So thank you.
Thank you, Juniper. Thank you, Elba. My name is Isabella Zizi. I come from the Northern Cheyenne, Riccara, and Muskogee Creek tribes. I'm a member of Idle No More SFBay and a signatory on the Indigenous Women of the Americas Defending Mother Earth Treaty. And I reside in Richmond, California, occupied Ohlone territory, which is also known as the village of Huichin, Awashto. And I came here really offering my work that I've been doing with Idle No More SFBay, and I've been a member since early 2014, and that's really when I started to become more involved with the work that the Indigenous grandmothers, I shall say, that started the movement. Well, that started their chapter out here in the Bay Area. So Idle No More was actually originated up north in Canada, where First Nations women came together. 3 First Nations women and one of a settler's descent had came together, who were they're really struggling with their rights and their water rights and their own sovereignty, when their prime minister at that time was really trying to take it away from them. And they pretty much sat at a living room table and said, you know what, we can't be idle no more. We have to do something. We have to take action. And so because of that movement back in 2012, it really inspired us here in the Bay Area. Well, more so there was Indigenous grandmothers, I'd say about 7 of them, who were actually meeting with each other on a monthly basis over the years, praying for a just transition, praying for clean air, clean water, and clean soil, and a healthy and vibrant future for those who come after us, and even including our non-human relatives. And that has really stuck with us with the work that we're doing, and really tying it to what's in our own backyards. And myself, since I grew up in Richmond, I was definitely impacted by the Chevron explosion that happened in 2012 and the continuous pollution that they let out every single day in my community, and have really just taken on this obligation to stand for what is right, and to also come at it in a way that I'm protesting, really protecting our Mother Earth, protecting the land, protecting everybody around us and those who are yet to come, to ensure that safe and healthy future, and making sure that we continue to push for the solutions that we all know already exist, and to continue to stand up against the solutions that are false. And the false solutions that I'm really focusing on is the carbon offsets and carbon trading, and not seeing that as a solution to help us move forward. And I'm currently at work. I'm going to keep this short, but I'm currently at work. I work at a nonprofit called Urban Tilth, and I was just weeding around our orchard here in Richmond. So it was nice to be in the land and nice to be with you all. Thank you.
Leaders. My name is Jenny Wun, and I'm the co-founder of AAPI Women Lead. I'm normally on the back end, so it's very rare that folks see my face. Elba is nodding their head because if they get it. So I'm excited to be practicing my public speaking skills and kind of talking about what we do. So in summary, who we are, AAPI Women Lead is a survivor-led and former sex worker-led organization, and our mission is to amplify AAPI women, femmes, and non-binary communities to end the intersection and layers of violence against our communities at systemic, institutional, and interpersonal levels. So that's kind of our primary mission. It's big, but it's possible. And we do this through community-driven research, youth programs, youth community-driven research. We are currently launching our intergenerational research program, which we're super juiced about. We do this through healing workshops and claiming our traditional forms of healing. We do community safety seminars because we are also abolitionists and we believe that we keep each other safe. We also have community-based mutual aid funding or funds, and we do annual conferences where we bring together the incredible leaders to talk about violence, redefine what violence is, and we do this work in solidarity with Indigenous, Black and Latinx leaders as well, and community members. So that's kind of the gist of what we do. And I do the back end work where we make those dreams happen. Yes. And thank you again for having me.
Of course. Well, it's amazing to hear about just the incredible work that you guys are doing and the organizations that you represent. And I was wondering if you could share with us a little about your journey to activism and to the roles that you hold now.
I can start, if that's okay. So I grew up in Oakland, in Fruitville, very immigrant community, and I saw a lot of the disparities, even as a kid, of what I saw on TV and what was in my neighborhood. And I grew up in a church, and a really religiously conservative church, but while I don't espouse to most of those ideals now, one of the things I held on to, and I think launched me into what I do now, is this really, is what I learned about justice in my faith and in the Bible. I think, and in that kind of studying, I really continued. I got my undergrad in biblical studies. I've got my master's in philosophical and systematic theology from the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley. And I just really saw how justice was tied to faith, race, sexuality, and everything. And so as a person of faith, I see all of the work that I do as a part of that work. And I think what I believe is that all justice is social. There's no justice that one person gets to keep. And so I think social justice is also kind of an interesting misnomer in that way. But nonetheless, that was one of the things that really brought me into this work, and still keeps me into this work, is hope and faith. I believe for myself, I need to believe in something bigger, and sometimes that's God, sometimes that's the people, sometimes that's my friends. But I believe that faith is what keeps me in this work, because this work can be really, really, really hard, as I'm sure the other panelists can attest to.
I think similarly to Elba, it's kind of how I grew up and what my environment was, that you don't really have a choice to, even if you try to leave it, like you understand what it's like growing up in the margins. So for me, being the daughter of war refugees and coming from a very powerful matriarch, advocacy was always a part of the family dynamic. I am a Bay Area native, and my mom is in East Oakland, and is a single mom. So growing up in these experiences, and I'm going to highlight that we came from Vietnam, right, through the war. So this forced displacement. And when we got here, we landed in a place that didn't even want us, right? So it's like growing up in this conflict of being American, but no one really wants you, right? And having to survive, and surviving the medical industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, being a Southeast Asian woman, like these parts of my identity, I can't remove them if I wanted to. And so being an activist, I don't even consider myself an activist, but I entered the world of social justice and doing transformative justice work because I needed to understand what was happening to me and to my family and to the people I love, because there was so much violence and so much harm. And I don't mean violence in the interpersonal one-on-one street fights. I'm talking about like poverty, bad, no access to Medicare, and trying to navigate EBT and food stamps. So I think I tried to leave it at one point. I was like, let me go lead my best American life. Let me go get that middle class income. But it was so violent when I got there. So I had to bust a U-turn and build out an organization that I thought would be less violent. And yeah, so I'm gonna leave it at that. That's how I got here. Hope it's helpful.
So as I mentioned a little bit briefly, the Chevron explosion that happened in 2012. And so I know maybe some folks had seen the photos or seen the videos, but seeing it in real life and actually having to go to the hospital because of that explosion, you know, it caused a huge, it was a terrible thing that happened, but it was a huge gateway for me to really like be clear on where the path that I'm supposed to be on. You know, when I seen the sun cover the black smoke because of the pollution that was let out of the Chevron explosion, I thought to myself, I need to do something and not just be scared looking outside of my window. And growing up, actually, like in elementary school, we would go through like these shelter in place little moments by our teachers where they would tell us, like, you know, if there's an earthquake, hide underneath the table or go in between the doorways. But there's another thing. If you start to smell anything odd or see any kind of smoke coming from this direction, make sure you guys have old rags or towels to cover the cracks in the doors or in your windows, because you guys really shouldn't be breathing in that bad air. And little did I know, you know, they're really talking about Chevron in our backyard. And that really brought me into the world of the environmental movement justice, the environmental movement. And like also realistically for myself as a young Indigenous woman living in an urban community, it's even another realm of, you know, of social justice as well, and even of finding a place of hope and survival all at the same time. And survival, I could literally spend a whole conversation about this particular topic, but I'm excited to just have more conversations with everyone.
Thank you. I love hearing from each of you the unique experiences you all hold in your work and just in life in general. For my journey into activism, I want to state this sort of plainly in the sense that there's a frequent and far too common story of disconnection and rejection of transgender people. And I have lived that reality in particular to my family, as well as within society. Being an immigrant and being multi-ethnic, with my father being a part of the military-industrial complex, marrying my mother and then taking her from her homeland to have me and my brother, is a reality that I hold alongside of coming into my gender identity at a young age that was heavily rejected by my staunchly religious father's family. In that way, I feel that coming into the idea of activism was not necessarily a choice or a understanding. It is the idea that the dream that my father so wished for never was built for me. It was actually including the story of us as trans people, either as sex workers or dead. And I truly believe that for any person who is Black, who is brown, Indigenous, who is API, who is someone who is living on the margins of society, who is trans or gender nonconforming, we need to strive for liberation for all, to be able to find in ourselves ability to live in the society that so often sidelines us or even harms us. So for me, activism wasn't necessarily a choice or something that is a journey with an endpoint. It was just my lived reality since I was born.
Thank you all for your answers. it's very inspiring, I think, to hear about the adversity that you've all faced and the way that you've kind of, risen to address the changes that you think need to be made. And I was wondering, kind of building on that, what inspires you in the work that you do?
I would love to just jump on that question. Actually, at the district, we really focus on not necessarily, again, that narrative of sort of the negative reality that we all face as trans and gender nonconforming people. I think we're often inundated with it in headlines, in the fact that we literally are so often visibilized for the harm that is done upon us. So the idea of the story to me is what inspires me. The immortality of it and the idea of metamorphosizing the harrowing realities that we face into these aspects of triumph and these sort of undeniable our beauty, and just the very fact that we have survived and we continue to live and we continue to strive towards equities for our community and for those who have faced similar adversities. So I think for me, my inspiration comes to hearing stories from fellow community members of where they come from, how they came to be, of their survival, and hopefully their active thriving in the society we live in now. So for me, that's what really inspires my work and keeps the fuel, keeps my fire burning. So thank you.
I just really quickly, I think when I first read this question, the things that popped in my head were just my friends, my mom, my partner, and I especially want to lift up like my queer friends, my trans friends, my Black Latinx friends of color, who this last year has been really just so extraordinarily hard for our community. We've lost so many people, whether through COVID, through mental health challenges, but we are resilient. Probably can't swear on here, AF. Like, we are so resilient, and that makes me get up in every morning. Like, it's not really like, if I look at the headlines, well, I do look at the headlines every day. I shouldn't, but if I just looked at the headlines, I would not get up in the morning. But knowing that my friends are out there doing the work, doing this kind of work, and we're all like, I think Juniper was saying earlier, like, our liberations are all interlocked, right? It's all we're all bound up with one another. And so that is what keeps me going every day, is just wanting to build a better world for my nibblings, where they don't have to experience discrimination, harassment, but in any way. So yeah, thank you.
What really inspires me, honestly, is so through the work that I've been involved in with I Don't Know More SFA, which I didn't get to say, but we're a volunteer group. It really just came naturally. And we're small, but very mighty. And as I was mentioning, it started with a grandmother's prayer group. And it was because of those grandmothers that actually inspired me to want to join, because I'm like, you guys are organizing something so amazing, which at the time it was refinery corridor healing walks, walking from one refinery town to the next within a 4-year time frame, and walking for clean air, clean water, and clean soil. I'm like, where are the young people at? Like, can I please join you? And so ever since then, they've given me this title of the baby grandmother, because I've been able to receive so much of their knowledge and wisdom and support and guidance, to the point where now when I see myself in different circles or even different events or even joining in webinars, I'm seeing more younger people just rising up and taking on that leadership role. And I'm just getting goosebumps just talking about it, because to me, what's so important is this intergenerational weaving of knowledge and support that needs to continue to happen, so that way we can let them rest. They've done all that they could up until this point, and they can continue on. But I think it's also important for us as younger people to step up into that role where we feel comfortable enough, where we feel safe enough, and feel supported, to continue on this legacy, so that way those who come after us can continue on this knowledge and this excess of growth.
Thank you for this question. I think for me, it comes in 3 parts. One is my mom drives this work in me. Largely, I want to represent her story of survival in the most authentic way possible. Largely because I think, as an Asian woman, a Southeast Asian woman, our stories are often invisibilized, and when they're told, it doesn't represent the nuances and complexities of our communities. This isn't to romanticize. There's all kinds of issues within our communities, but this world won't tell my mother's magic. It won't share that. She is simply just a refugee who is a welfare queen, right? So I refuse for that to happen. And I'm determined to tell her story and the stories of others who have survived like she has, like we have. So I think that's 1. 2, I truly believe that something else is possible. Like for me, being kind of like an intuitive person, like I feel like we're just right there. And to Isabella's point, taking on the torch of grandmothers, I think we're at a place, and I don't know if I'm being naive or just like overly hopeful. Either way, it feels like anything is possible and everything is possible. So I'm showing up every day with that mindset, like abolition is possible, period. Defending Black lives, people not killing Black folks, trans folks is possible. Access to food, water, land back is possible. And I feel like we are there with the young people on this call, with their magic, with their power. I feel like it excites me, even though it's tiring and really painful sometimes. But it feels really good that there are an incredible 4, 5, 6 people on this panel, plus the coordinators, 45 participants who are showing up to learn what activism could look like for them, right? And it looks like many things. So I'm glad we get to represent that and reflect these different ways of what we're calling activism. And it's exciting, right? Like, I just think it's possible, and it has to be possible. We don't even have a choice at this moment. We are definitely building a new world, and we're so glad we all get to do it together.
Thank you all for your answers. Jenny, I love your point. I love your kind of sentiment that liberation is possible. I think that really can uplift us as we kind of approach activism. And looking at the time, we want to start the audience Q&A after this. So feel free to send in any questions that you have for the panelists and we'll address them. But the final pre-written question that I wanted to ask is, what advice would you give to college students who want to do what you do, but are uncertain about a future in activism?
One thing for me, I haven't touched base on this in a very long time. So if I get emotional, I get emotional. I was probably about 18 years old, and now I'm 27. And there was this native rap artist. His name is Frank Wong, and he comes from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. And he came out to Oakland, and I was so excited because he was very inspiring to me and has a huge following. He had a huge following of young people. And at that time, I was like, I want to get young people to be as excited as I am about our world, about a beautiful future. How can I do that? And so then I pretty much asked him this question, like, how do you get young people to listen to you? And he just looked at me. Oh, I'm gonna cry. He just looked at me and He says, speak from your heart and always tell the truth. And when you speak from the heart, they'll listen. And I've like thought of just that little saying that he had shared with me, and it continues to carry me on. And I'm just so grateful for that moment because it's really helped me um, find my voice and find my passion of what I feel is truly important to me. And I just hope that that same message can maybe be inspiring to other people listening, that, continue to speak from your heart. And if something makes you all shaky and nervous and want to cry, that means you are doing the right thing and your ancestors are backing you up. Your community is backing you up. I will back you up. All of us here will back you up because we need more people to take on this action and to not be afraid, because we are supportive. We have a beautiful supportive community out here, and let's continue to thrive and do it.
I'll keep mine really short. This work is hard. Many hands make light work. So we need y'all, please. We're tired. But it's really good work. It's worth it. So find yourself, find your people, go build something better, and rest. And then do it again.
What I'd love to say is that the idea of it as a future really rings for me. And the aspect of the work that we are all doing, every person in this chat is really concerned with not just the past and the now, but the idea of the future. And the future, in my eyes, is a privilege. It is not a guarantee, and tomorrow is not promised. I think that when you think about your own future, have a space or a voice in these types of movements, I would like each person to kind of sit and inspect the truths that you have, those things that you tell yourself that you know are undeniably your realities, and note that there's space for that truth in the way that we move forward together in a movement. And that is how, in togetherness, we're able to, ensure that the direction that we're going towards in the future is the areas that we want to end up, that we will end up on softer seas, that we will end up on greener grass, that we will be surrounded by those who we love, whose futures are not guaranteed. And I want to think about how each step towards your future and with that work that you have behind you is changing the realities of folks who might not make it to tomorrow, to put it very plainly. So choosing to be an activist, choosing to speak with your voice and move with your body and do these things is not just for you, it is to ensure that every person you love can also step forward and have a tomorrow.
What advice would you give to college students who want to do what you do but are uncertain about a future or career in activism?
Thank you, everyone, for speaking so beautifully and authentically about your own experiences and sharing that with everyone. Can you repeat and speak up? I'm going to repeat and speak up. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry, I just got a message. Anyways, I like to think of things in parts because I'm a very logical thinker, logic brain. The way that I got here was a couple of things. So activism can look like many things. It could look like taking it to the streets. It could look like working at a community organization or a nonprofit. I like to think of activism, especially for someone who's just kind of curious about what that means, at the very, in your interpersonal life, right? So thinking about ways and how you treat yourself with love, grace, forgiveness, and then how you also treat people in your community. Like, what are those relationships that you're having? Are they safe? Are they kind? Are they compassionate and caring? Are you checking your racism, right? Checking your ableism. Like, are you doing that as an individual, right? So that's one way to just be a good human in the world. And to me, that's activism. Like because sometimes like folks in the activist world are actually very toxic. And I'm always like, how did you even get there? And it's harmful to the folks that work in the movement. And if we want our movement to live and thrive and build our dream world, we got to be right with ourselves and be right with our people. And that also means we can make mistakes, right? Because mistakes happen. And that also means taking accountability, right? If we believe in abolition and accountability and community accountability, we can start with ourselves first, right? I mean, that's an everyday practice, showing up for yourself, for your people, and then undoing some of the practices that we've picked up over the years. So that's one thing. Secondly, prior to finding AAPI Women Lead, I was an urban planner, doing my best to live the best American dream. But I learned, and I was also a youth worker. I've worked at Trader Joe's. I've worked at a cannabis club. I've worked doing customer service. And I think that the relationships that I've built and just the different experiences I've had with all kinds of people prepared me for this moment to create my own organization. So I think that whatever path you take, you can organize and be an activist in all those paths. And I learned from an elder Chinese organizer from Chinese Progressive Association. She said, and it stuck with me, and I know I'm taking a long time, so thank you for your patience. She said to me, if you're good in tech, do tech. If you're a good scientist and you dream to be a scientist, be a scientist. But when you get there, be ready to organize and mobilize people. Right, so I was an urban planner who organized for sexual harassment trainings, for diversity inclusion, because I had the experience of organizing and just working in community before I got to urban planning, right? So really, for me, I guess it's a path, a journey that got me here. And know that it's interpersonal, it's it's the people you love, the people that love you. And I think that's a part of what it takes to get to our dream world in this movement.
Thank you all for your answers. That's definitely very inspiring, I think, to our audience. And I wanted to especially thank you, Isabella, for your vulnerability and sharing something so personal to you. I really love that idea of speaking from the heart. I think that's so inspiring. A question that we got from the audience is, what advice and experience do the panelists have in overcoming roadblocks and challenges in activism?
I can go. I think I have 2 points that I feel that speak about experience in my work, and then advice as a result of it. First and foremost, I think that when you're working with communities who are minority communities, who are communities who have been systematically oppressed via racism, classism, sexism, all of these sort of horrible systems that look to harm us, you're going to come across a lot of people who carry with them trauma. And I think working with folks who have consistently been traumatized as someone who also carries your own traumas can be a kind of roadblock to seeing kind of the outcome that you're seeking. Because oftentimes what trauma does is it puts us in a fog, a mist of like, what are the next steps that we can take towards finding the light of the situation or finding the outcome that we want to have, in particular to movements and to workflows and things like that are very much necessary to bring everyone on board and go in the same direction so that we're not working against each other. With those sorts of situations, I think being trauma informed and knowing what it looks like and how it manifests will serve you and that every person carries with them a story. So when you meet people, even if things do, as Jenny pointed out, you might meet people in activism that you are like, how did you get in this room? And I think that your first reaction is not as important as your second reaction. So I think we all, as we grow older and again, move into the next day and each day, kind of unwork the ideas of where they're coming from and try to see where they're at, while also setting for yourself boundaries of what you will and will not accept. So I think frequently as a trans woman, I've experienced, particularly in like, you know, feminist spaces, multiple avenues of like, you know, the idea that like I am not a woman, that I do not have a voice in these sorts of conversations, that I somehow am just a charade trying to infiltrate. And I think that a boundary of mine is that I don't even listen to that. Like to me, it's just like, you're obviously not even within the same realm. Like regardless of what sort of story you carry with you, it's obvious that you're not willing to meet people where they're at and like listen to their realities, because they live in their own sort of reality. So it's important for me to hold those boundaries, but also when someone comes in who might not have the experience with like particularly trans community or gender non-binary people, or folks who are like folks who are two-spirit even is a whole another, or people who have gender identities that are decolonized and not a part of the Western canon. Folks can often say things that are harmful or seemingly toxic, but it comes from a place of needing education. So the second thing that you would think is like, does this person need to be brought up to speed about the world we live in? So I think that's one of the roadblocks, and then a piece of advice I'd give in particular to this type of work.
I just wanted to add some experiences that I've gone through in the environmental justice movement is, you know, of like big oil refineries or shutting down big meetings where they're having decision makings of whether they're going to be in favor of the fossil fuel. 99% of the chances they are. Most people think that we have a hatred towards the people who work at these facilities or these industries. And I've learned over time that, you know, we as people actually shouldn't have a human enemy. Our enemies should be capitalism, should be white supremacy, should be the things that are tearing us apart as people, that is really distracting us from living our true selves and living in balance and harmony with our Mother Earth, and really understanding what we should be doing to continue to protect one another and to protect those who come after us. And so it's a constant reminder and a constant way of really being and understanding that, you know, we and myself, I do this in a place of love. I do this in a place out of care and concern for where our world is shifting, and making sure that I'm making the right decision to where my great grandchildren won't have to worry about all the chaos that we're dealing with, to make sure that that's not even a thought or a concern to them. And so that's one thing that I probably would like to like just plant a seed, is try not to have a human enemy. And also think about the next generations who come after you, and think about how you're able to take action in whatever way that you're able to, and knowing that it is making a difference, it can make a difference, and that you will have others looking up to you, and we'll carry on that torch, as we were mentioning earlier.
Yes, for sure. What advice and experience do panelists have in overcoming roadblocks or challenges in activism? And Jenny, could you maybe move your mic a little bit closer? Just, it was a little hard to hear you there.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate Isabella's reminder that a lot of the times the challenges with white supremacy and patriarchy, like these bigger systemic challenges, and often it kind of infiltrates the movement and people. It becomes conflicts like interpersonally. And I guess I would go back and say that I think it's really important as you enter activism, or if you're continuing activism, that you really, and I said this earlier, do practice accountability to yourself and to each other as ways to stay in the movement. Because often it is, I would say learning what accountability is, learning how to apologize, learning how to express that you've been hurt. It's really, for me, it's really learning and honing in my skills of my interactions with people. Because as Mia Mingus, who is one of my favorite activists, disability activists, says, is like, we don't want to build a world where we throw people away. And that also, speaks to abolition. We don't want to throw people away into prisons, right? So if we're going to not do that, then it goes back to us. What are we doing to love up on each other and care for each other and make sure that we're providing safety and resources and care? And it's not easy, period, right? Because our own personal feelings get in the way, our politics are conflicting. But for me, if I remember that I'm not trying to throw people away, then what do I do? Right? That's always the question. And this doesn't mean I got to love everyone. We can live in conflict, but we don't got to throw folks away. And I think that to me has become the challenge, particularly around this moment of anti-Asian violence. Because there's a lot of people that I'm like, I want to throw away. But my job is to, how do I pull you in? How do I get you to come and build up these dreams that so many folks at the margins have? And that's kind of where it is every day, like back and forth. So accountability and not throwing people away is how I remember my, is how I work with the challenges. Thanks.
I'd just like to update my answer of who inspires me. This panel is incredible. I'm like, wow, I want to be better. Like I get so mad and I want to throw people away, but no, I want to do better. So thank you. Oh, my light went away. Did you want to go to the next question, Amelia, or do you want me to answer this one? I know we're running up on time here.
Yeah, I if it's okay with you, I think in
totally,
the respect for time, I would like to. We have another audience question, and I hope, I know this is a big question, but maybe try to answer it briefly. It'll be our final question. But do the panelists have any advice for how to navigate coalition building, understanding that our liberation will be achieved in unity, while at the same time understanding that sometimes we have different goals that we're trying to achieve with our organizing?
It's a great question. It's really beautiful talking about we're going to build better worlds together, and it's beautiful, and it's going to get very Pollyanna very quick. But in reality, people are people, and there's going to be disagreements. There's going to be fighting. Just like in a family, there's going to be really different ways of looking at things. But like you said, we're still bonded together. We're still linked together. And so it's really, really hard. One of the things I would say is just to make sure that you have, I think what Jenny was saying earlier really speaks to this question as well, is that personal accountability and setting expectations for yourselves with each other, especially as part of whether you're doing something solo with your friends around the block, getting stuff together for a food drive, or whether you're part of a big organization that's doing a giant contract for a city and you have to do this coalition, right? So no matter where it is, like that personal accountability, the setting expectations, it makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what I said earlier, is like find your people, because even if we're all along the same link of liberation, maybe you don't really see exactly eye to eye on how to defund the police or how to abolish the police, right? So there's different pockets of things. And so it's really about like finding your niche, holding yourself accountable, and doing the work in love.
Yeah, I can touch base on this from personal organizing too. Like, I've been able to experience what it's like to to work with a national coalition and also work with a local coalition. And I ain't gonna lie, national coalition and organizing is not fun. It's very crazy because you're getting all sorts of people who have lots of great ideas, and then you also have lots of limits because of different people's organizations or nonprofits, and what some can do and what some can't do. And with local organizing and coalition building, honestly, it was like, the different actions that I Don't Know More SFA had been organizing over the years, we started to notice the same groups of people showing up, and also noticing the same groups of people doing very similar actions or focusing on very similar issues. And we just decided, hey, you know what? We like what you're doing. You like what we're doing. You support Indigenous peoples in the best way that you know how. Here, let's start organizing together. And that's how we've been able to become successful, because we've been able to actually create a respectful layer of understanding that our white allies, really, they're all white allies, they're learning their place on where they should be and how to be inclusive of Indigenous people, people of color, BIPOC, and our LGBTQ communities. And it's not always easy, but it's a step forward. It's always a step forward. And that's my best answer, is as long as you find people who you groove with, who you feel is comfortable, to the point where you guys know you're going to take action and make action and it be successful, then go ahead and continue it on.
I think, thank you so much, Isabella. I definitely agree. I think that when you're in the thick of it, when you're constantly working alongside other organizations, other allies, there comes a point where it's almost like the synchronization, like a dance, that you're able to kind of guess what their next steps will be. But I think that there are people who, and like organizations that very much rely not necessarily on that intuitive nature. So I think for me, with organizations, we often try to work with radical transparency. So as a tool, like being able to not make anything a mystery or a question of like, oh, what is the next step? Like it's almost being overly explanatory in some ways, but I think it's saved, at least myself, a lot of troubles when I've been doing organizing work, to specifically have everything out in the open regarding the next steps, the next goals, like a step-by-step, a checklist, things like that. So people didn't feel lost on the way. It creates a map for them to be able to read and move forward with. And I think that coalitions, when they run into difficulties, is that there's not a very clear roadmap of point A to point E. People suddenly are like forgetting the alphabet. So what you need to do is sometimes remind them like, oh, you go from A to B and then B to C, and then so on and so forth. And I know that sounds very elementary, and I don't want it to sound diminutive at all. But I think that when you are dealing with people from many, many, many different backgrounds, we all come with our own sets of logic, culturally, educationally, and intuitively, that setting everyone into the same sort of roadmap and giving them transparency is going to only empower them with the knowledge of where the direction of the coalition or movement or group of people is going.
I think what's really helpful, particularly with AAPI Women Lead, that has allowed us to build out our movement, especially around political education, is one, it's community driven, right? So the agenda is set by the community. Two, we work with communities and folks at the margins leading the movement. So we always make sure that these voices, these voices in particular, folks at the margin in particular, are amplified. And that helps us, one, be accountable to our folks. If we're about liberation, then we gotta work with folks in the margins, ourselves in the margins. So I think those are two things that are really helpful. And then in terms of coalition, be grounded in your principles and be very transparent. I know a lot of us talked about transparency, but be transparent in who you are. And I'm a firm believer, if folks want to rock with you based on your principles, they will come. So stay grounded in what you represent.
Great. Well, thank you all. Unfortunately, we're a little over time already, so that definitely wraps up our time. But I think this was amazing. Thank you to all of the panelists for your amazing answers. I think we were able to learn a lot about, how sometimes activism arises from, a place of hardship and a place of challenge. But, by finding the people that can back you up, I think, like Jenny said, liberation is possible. And I hope that's what we can all take away from this. So thank you again. We hope you all found this inspiring. You were able to learn a lot. And a big thank you again to our amazing panelists for sharing their experience and their knowledge with us.